have notes. Remember, this unit is about evolution. Today's aim will be how do we describe the theory of evolution. So taking a look at this cartoon, it says, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb to that tree. Now clearly that plays a role in our understanding of something called survival of the fittest. So using that picture or what you already know, for your do now, write down what survival of the fittest, only the strong survive, what does that mean to you? Take a moment now. Okay, so maybe you said something about how only certain organisms are going to be adapted to do well in their environment. For example, in the cartoon, not everybody will be able to climb the tree. In fact, only one organism will probably be able to climb the tree, which is the monkey. Everyone else would not be able to because they don't have the right adaptations. The same happens in nature. So evolution is defined as change over time. And basically, scientists have gone around and collected information about different organisms, how related they are, how much they've changed, and when they've changed. They come up with pictures like on the right, which is called either an evolutionary tree, a phylogenetic tree, or even a cladogram. Notice that there are different organisms coming off of branches. The closer they are to a branch, the more related they are. The further they are, for example, a bird and a tree, means they're less related. If we go all the way to the bottom, we find the common ancestor. Every time two branches come together, it's a common ancestor. Notice that the common ancestors for all of these organisms are the protists. So when we talk about evolution, we have to talk about Charles Darwin, because he is the grandfather of evolution. And he traveled all around the world as what we call a naturalist. He was studying nature, and he basically looked at different organisms, looked at their environment, their habitat, and just made some observations so that we could understand them better in the future. Based on this, he proposed a mechanism, a reason how evolution occurred, and he called that natural selection. So natural selection has a few important points. The first is overproduction. So think about in Finding Nemo, where there are lots and lots of fish eggs produced, but few actually survive. We did a few examples of this in class as well, but the concept is more offspring are produced than can actually survive. Second idea is variation. We should know this word already from the word variety. Basically, thinking about our genes, how everything can recombine or mutate to create new combinations in the future. Next, struggle for survival. So offspring have to compete in order to survive. And the ones that have the best genes for that environment, the ones that are best adapted, will survive and hopefully reproduce to pass on their genes to the next offspring. Reproduction is the final thought. And remember that genes will only be passed on if an organism gets to reproduce. For things like bacteria, this is much easier because they only need themselves. For other organisms that need a mate, it might be a little bit trickier. Another term that we use when we talk about evolution is called acquired traits. So only the genes that we're born with are really passed down. And remember that only genes that are in the gametes are being transferred to offspring. Remember again, this is for sexually reproductive organisms as opposed to bacteria. Also, traits you acquire or gain over your lifetime aren't passed on. So examples like memory cells when you're fighting an infection, learning another language, maybe you're playing basketball and you learn a lot of skills. Those don't get passed on to the next generation. So we're going to talk about environmental pressures next. The first example is a giraffe. The environmental pressure is that there are high branches, there's trees and there's shrubs, as you notice in this image. You can see there's lots of green everywhere. Sometimes when there's a drought, it's a dry season, the green on the ground here will dry up. So you can kind of see some branches back here that don't have as many leaves. In those times of drought or dry seasons, the giraffe with the longer neck that can reach maybe the branches that not the other giraffes could might be able to survive better and then reproduce to pass on that gene. Now this is only a theory, it's not necessarily accepted by every single scientist. There are other scientists that actually believe that giraffe necks are used in sexual selection, and when males will be fighting over a female, they actually fight each other with their necks. So the one with the stronger and bigger neck will, the majority of the time, be the winner and get the female to reproduce. Next example is a cactus. So the environmental pressure, something in the environment causing it to have this variation, would be that it's dry, there's not very much water. The way that the cactus protects itself in this environment, instead of having a normal leaf that's a little more porous, there's more holes in it, it has a very waxy surface. So what happens is a lot of the moisture that's inside of that leaf gets to stay there because it doesn't get absorbed into the air. Next is the shark. Remember that sharks live in aquatic or water environments. In order to be able to float and swim easily and catch prey, the sharks actually have adapted to have cartilage instead of bones. So that keeps them light and flexible, and they can catch their prey and get through the water very easily. Sharks also, if you notice, there are two colors here, and the top part of them is a little bit darker than the bottom. And this is a sort of camouflage. So when fish might be underneath, they might look up, and remember the sun is up at the top. So there's a lot of light towards the top of the ocean. So if a fish would look up, or a human even, they might not be able to see the shark because the light belly blends in with the light above. Also, the same is true if anybody's looking down, because remember the bottom of the ocean is much darker, so the darker top part, if anybody's above the shark looking down, they might not see it. So that's just another adaptation. You don't need to write that down, but it's good to know. And finally, we have the rabbit. Remember that rabbits are prey for a lot of different organisms, so there's lots of predators that might want to catch up to them and eat them. One variation that's been successful for the rabbits is that they have very strong hind legs, which are in the back, in order to get away. And you can see in this picture a few of them kind of jumping around. You can see this is a much bigger leg than the first one. Okay, in case you missed any of those, here's the chart one more time. And our final summary question is basically to describe natural selection. So based on what we already talked about today, and also this image, so we'll just go over this quickly. There's something called an insecticide, and you can see it being applied here through these airplanes, and they're basically spraying it down. It's a chemical, and it's used to kill bugs. So if we start at this first picture at the top, so the chemical kills a lot of these bugs. It kills all the ones that have this little green gene, okay? The one with the red gene, however, for some reason is kind of a mutant. So for whatever reason, it has a mutation that allows it to stay alive. So even though it's been sprayed by this insecticide to keep these plants from getting eaten, this bug survives. So he's a survivor. So notice we've got these 4 dead ones. These were all the green gene. The red gene is the survivor. So what does the survivor then do? It's going to be able to reproduce and reproduce again, and it will continue to do this, causing it to increase the gene frequency of the red gene. So now just think about what natural selection is. What does that mean? How is nature actually selecting? Maybe even give an example in your summary to prove that you really know what the theory is.